Hello, and welcome to another day of English 2. I'm your online teacher, Miss Bear. As a reminder, we've been working on a national writing project argument writing piece about lab-grown meat. And this is the same graphic that I have put up at the beginning of every lesson, just explaining the project of National Writing Project. So if the teacher in your classroom has any questions about the project as a whole, they can visit nwp.org and learn more about National Writing Project. Today, we are going to dig into what the standard itself requires of you, the writer, when you are putting together this piece. So, the last time that we met, you guys wrote your argument. You finished writing it. You got everything out. You may have done some revisions. You may have looked at some other things. But we looked at the evidence that we put together, the reasons. We looked at our claims and our counterclaims. You guys looked at all of those things. And now we're going to have you do a self-revision based on the standard. And so that way you know exactly what is required of you. And so I'm going to walk through the standard. We're going to talk about the each part of the standard so that you have a better idea of how you're going to meet that standard. So let's go through. We're going to go through the standard. We might go through it twice, or your teacher may decide to go over it in class with you as well. So let's look at the main standard. W10.1 says, write arguments to support claims in an analysis of substantive topics or texts using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence. So, what is a substantive topic? Okay, so we know substantive is an adjective because it comes before a noun. The noun is topic. And substantive means involving matters of major or practical importance to all concerned. So, in order to meet the standard, it needs to be a matter that's important to those who will read it or important to the community as a whole. And so as we talked about earlier in the week, this idea of lab-grown meat is of great importance because you should be aware of what you're putting into your body. So it is a substantive topic. We have read multiple texts. You may have also done a little research on your own, so you will have that sufficient evidence. Sufficient means you have enough evidence. How do you know when you have enough evidence? When you write an argument and you want to make sure that you have sufficient evidence, you have enough evidence, then whoever is reading your paper will be convinced by the evidence that you put forward. When you have enough evidence, your reader will be convinced. If you don't have enough evidence, then your reader may not be convinced that your side is the right side to be on. So that's how you know what substantive or sufficient evidence looks like. All right, so let's look at part A of this standard. It says that you are to introduce precise claims, distinguish the claim from an alternate or opposing claim, and create an organization that establishes clear relationships among claims, counterclaims, reasons, and evidence. That is a whole mouthful. When you introduce a precise claim, you're doing that in the introduction of your essay. So at the very first paragraph, you are introducing that precise claim. Then in order to distinguish your claim from the counterclaim, then you would have, you would make sure that you said something as to the effect of, while some may believe this, others are going to believe this. So you are distinguishing one side of the fence to the other side of the fence for this particular argument. So you need to make sure that you've done that. When you are explaining that in your paper, you need to make sure that, again, you are presenting evidence to support that counterclaim, because you want to be able to tell your reader why their side is wrong, okay? So Part A also says that you should have this organization that establishes clear relationships. right? So those relationships are going to be your transition words, your transition phrases. So when you go to say that this person believes this, then you need to then establish why that piece of evidence supports your claim or it supports the counterclaim. So you need to use those effective words and transitions to make sure that you're establishing those relationships. Okay? All right, the next part of this is part B, and it says to develop claims and counterclaims fairly, supplying evidence for each while pointing out the strengths and limitations of both in a manner that anticipates the audience's knowledge level and concerns. Again, this one is pretty big because you want to make sure that you are balanced in your claim and counterclaim. So you want to make sure that you present both of those fairly. Why do you want to be fair in how you present that evidence? Well, because when you know both sides of an argument and you know both sides really well, then it's easier to convince your reader to side with you instead of that opposing side. It's when you have that knowledge, that grasp of understanding of the topic that you can convince someone else that your side is the correct side to be on. So think about how your essay that you've written, does it show both sides fairly? And are you able to convince your audience that they should care about this topic and your side of that topic? All right, let's look at C. C says to use words, phrases, and clauses to link the major sections of the text, create cohesion, and clarify the relationships between claims and reasons, between reasons and evidence, and between claims and counterclaims. Again, guys, this is that piece that I said using those effective transitions. Those transitional words and phrases will help you distinguish and link those sections. So make sure that you're using those and you're using those effectively. You may want to consider going back to our previous unit and rereading over that example essay, that example argument essay that we presented, because you may go through and identify those transitional words and phrases so that you can use them more effectively in your essay. So this is the second argument piece that we're writing, and so you should have, your writing should be at the next level because this is the second piece that you're writing. So you should have all of this, and your essay should have grown based on the knowledge that you have gained from that unit till this one. All right, so let's look at what D asks us to do of part of this standard. Establish and maintain a formal style and objective tone while attending to the norms and conventions of the discipline in which they are writing. And when they say they're talking about you. So you need to maintain a formal style as you're writing. What does that mean? That means that you've indented your paragraphs, you've got the correct format. Your teacher may have APA style or MLA style, and they will help you with that. If they don't have a specific style that the teacher in the classroom prefers, then you may want to consider a style that you're familiar with, and you stick with that particular style. Then it says, attend to the norms and conventions of the discipline of which you're writing. So this is a scientific argument essay, and so it may look a little bit different than that literary analysis that you've written. You're going to make sure that you use some of the vocabulary that you have learned through this unit. Norms are just the rules. Norms is just a fancy word for rules. So there are specific rules to the English language. You need to make sure that you're using your commas appropriately, when to use a semicolon, when to use capital letters. All of those things are the rules of the English language. And if you are using some type of word processing system, whether that's a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word document, whatever word processing system that you're using, that will help you make sure that your grammar and your spelling are correct, and that will help you meet this part of the standard. And lastly is E. Provide a concluding statement or section that follows from and supports the argument that's been presented. Okay, so it says provide a concluding statement. Really and truly, you need a concluding paragraph. And that concluding paragraph should contain your argument as a whole, condense it down, make it pretty. It's like you're putting a bow on it. Like when you open a Christmas present, the ones that are just wrapped without a bow, you're like, those are okay. But you see one with a bow and you think, that's got something really good in it, right? So the conclusion is putting that nice, pretty bow on it. In that conclusion, you are acknowledging that counterclaim and that you are giving more oomph to your argument as a whole. That's that last final word, because you know as well as I do, when you are in an argument with someone, you want the final word. What will that final word be, and how will you leave your reader? Will you leave your reader wanting to do more research on their own? Will you have convinced the reader that your side is the correct side to be on? Or will you leave your writer going, so what? If your reader at the end gets there and goes, so what? Then you really have not written an effective essay, an effective argument essay. So that is all that we have for today. Until tomorrow, happy reading and happy writing.